Good afternoon to members of the public tuning in. We are just waiting to reach quorum for we can begin our meeting, so it'll be a few more moments. Greetings, everyone. This is the 15th meeting of the Civic Works Committee. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request of any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. For the public and committee's information, I myself am in chambers. No other councilors have joined me in chambers today. Councilor Helmer and Councilor Cassidy makes quorum for us at committee, as Councilor Van Merbergen and Councilor Turner have sent regrets. And we are assuming that Mr. Mayor Holder will join us shortly. So turning to committee for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Perfect, seeing none, thank you for that. On the consent items, just to make the public and committee aware that there are a couple added things, not new added business, just an added bylaw, source of financing, and a staff report. In regards to consent item 2.1, staff does have a presentation for us on that one today. So looking to committee to see if they would like any of the consent items 2.1 through to 2.6 pulled separate. Okay, Councilor Cassidy, just anything for you that you want pulled, or are we good to look for a mover and a seconder for all of 2.1 through to 2.6?
We're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so I would need a mover and a seconder for item 2.1 through to 2.6. Okay, moved by Councilor Helmer, seconded by Councilor Cassidy. In regards to item 2.1, I will now turn to staff for their staff report, as this was a big report on traffic and parking bylaw process improvement and consolidation, which it will have an admin focus and an expedited process for Londoners. And welcome, Mr. Mayor. Do you have any pecuniary interests? We currently have items 2.1 through to 2.6 on the floor. Nope, perfect. So I will turn it to staff then for their presentation in regards to item 2.1. Mr. McGuire?
Yes, good afternoon. The report before you recommends a new process, departure from the way we've been doing it for, well, as long as I've been at the city, for making routine changes to the traffic and parking bylaw to improve customer service by reducing the time it takes to implement some of the changes. It's a complaint we often hear from the public that it takes us too long to change parking on their street, as an example. The items benefiting from the new process are in section 2.2.2 of the report. And in schedule 1, which is on pages 44 to 49 of the agenda, is a section of the criteria that administration would use for making those changes. Generally, where parking is permitted or prohibited, where turning restrictions or lane restrictions are required, or where stop and yield signs are installed. And there are a few others like loading zones. The new process also includes how the appropriate ward councillor will be informed of changes prior to implementation, and which property owners would be notified of pending parking changes. I'd just like to note contentious issues, amendments that we cannot resolve with the public to a satisfactory, we would remove those from this administrative process and bring them to Civic Works Committee like we currently do with amendments. Some of the things not included administratively would be the body of the bylaw itself and schedules that are not routine, as in section 2.2.1 of the report, such as pedestrian crossover, heavy truck restrictions, and speed limits. These will still be brought forward to Civic Works. And I think it was also been mentioned, this report consolidates all of the changes that have been made to the bylaw since 2017. So it will create a new bylaw and a new starting point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We also had brief staff comments in regards to item 2.6, as this was a bid for our split stream rear loading waste collection trucks, and staff managed to do great work behind the scenes to still keep this project on track. Mr. Wellhauser, would you like to make comment on this one, as it is something that we don't see often through committee and procurement?
Thank you, and through the chair, just a quick update on this report. So you recall back in September, City Council approved the award of 26 split stream rear loading waste collection trucks to London Machinery Incorporated. Unfortunately, in November, we received communication from LMI, London Machinery Incorporated, indicating that one of their major subcontractors, Peterbilt, who provides their cab and chassis component of the build, was unable to meet the demand, and they are canceling all orders in the foreseeable future, with not taking any new orders until 2023, and they're going to renegotiate their terms of contract. In that information, we went forward, worked with our purchasing department, and we looked at the second bid that was submitted by Team Truck Centers, another local company here in London. Their bid was the second bid that was submitted. It did meet all the terms and conditions. We were able to review that bid, and we are recommending that we accept that bid to maintain the green bin collection program, which is going to start later in 2023. So, and the other good news piece to this, it actually is within the budget price. It's actually very, very close to the original bid. So in the end, it worked out, but a lot of hard work was done by our fleet department, Jay Stanford's team, and along with our procurement division. Thank you.
Thank you for those updates, as they were both something that we don't normally see coming through committee. Looking to committee for questions and comments to staff that you would like to bring forward at this time. I will start my speakers list with Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I just wanted to say to Mr. McGuire and the team that brought forward the changes to the process for traffic and parking. I think that's a really good change. I'm optimistic that it's going to result in those changes being implemented, that much faster. And a lot of the changes are quite routine and allow council to focus in on the things that maybe are a bit more difficult. So I really appreciate that. I know it's a lot of work to bring that sort of change forward in a comprehensive way. And good work, everyone. To Mr. Wellhauser, I just wanted to say that sometimes there's added benefits to going through a fair and open procurement process, which is one of the ones we've seen here, where for some reason the first highest scoring supplier can't deliver, and we'd be able to go to the second one. So I can only imagine what was involved with that. I'm sure there's some panic moments where we're thinking, oh, we're maybe not gonna be able to get these vehicles at all. I'm glad to see that it's working out and staying pretty close to the original price. Great work.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And I know that the staff have noted that they're seeing more supply chain issues throughout the corporation and various things that we're doing. And there'll be a further conversation on that and ways to help mitigate risk in the future. Looking to committee for anyone else who would like to make comments on all of item 2.1 through to 2.6. As chair, I would just ask Mr. Felberg to speak on item 2.5, being the commemorative naming of city assets. This is and it's the term of reference, so it's going to be looking at next steps of how we're doing it and a corporation-wide approach versus just in regards to streets. So Mr. Felberg, as this is the beginning of a long conversation with the community and council, if you want to just give a high-level overview of where we're at and next steps.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. The process at this point is in its initial stages, and our plan is to report back after our consultation with the community in late 2022. Following that, we'll be bringing forward some reports related to the policies in the spring of 2023, and we'll also be recommending that we lift the moratorium that we're proposing today. The consultation process, we need some time to really do this thoughtfully and do it broadly. There's a number of different perspectives out there on how we approach this, and we really want to get input from the public. I guess you could say there are three sort of themes that we're looking at. So there's operational matters, looking at when it comes to street naming, for example, repetition, continuity, and ensuring that we have general wayfinding for EMS and others. We want to look at the historical recognition component as well. So who was the person, why are they being recognized, and what was their contribution to London? And then of course our anti-racism and anti-oppression approach, and how do we celebrate the cultural differences that we have. We recognize currently that our commemorative naming policy or our street renaming policy does have some limitations. It was adopted in 1994, and we really haven't looked at it since then. So this is certainly timely and an important thing to do. And as noted in B of the recommendation, we're also looking to reduce some of the confusion by placing a hold on any new applications for renaming until we've completed that work. For new developments that come forward, we'd continue to work off our pre-existing list and within the framework of those existing policies. And there's certainly some risk that when we come back to you in 2023, that there might be a street name that we've just approved in a new development. And when we apply our anti-racism framework, we might determine that we need to change it, but we feel that the impact would be low at that point. For as any new developments between now and then, we'll probably have a very low number of houses that have actually been constructed, and the impact to residents would be low. Happy to take any further questions, and I do have a team here supporting me, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Shaughnessy, and I'm not sure if Ms. Morris is here as well. But we're here if you have any questions.
Thank you for that, as it's a crucial initial first step with terms of reference. Looking to committee, I have no one else on my speakers list, so I will now recognize Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. First of all, I'd like to applaud the initiative about recognizing appropriate street names based on, as you've indicated, historical context, contributions to London, and consistency with the direction London is taking. I think if there's going to be a question mark, will be the extent to which this process is developed, probably for renaming as much as anything. And I think certainly it's important to do things thoughtfully, important to do things appropriately. And I look at it from the context of how far back we go to try to understand historically what might be an appropriate or appropriate consideration of a renaming. This may be early times, and so I don't think it's fair to ask that as a hard question today, but I'm very mindful. I know that, and we're all aware of situations as it relates to things like statues, for example, where some have been taken down in various communities because of the of community response to historical situations, and so I'm trying to understand if we're at a point yet, or if it's just too early in the process to understand how far back we go, and in the sense of what constitutes racist and oppressive, and I'm very sensitive to that. And how you and whether things like, for example, I know in some communities there was talk that if a statue was offensive, why don't you put a plaque beside it instead, that not instead, but as well, that explains the historical context and brings people currently to date with the basically bring things into today's understanding. So and so that's where I'm trying to get to, is because I'm mindful that and I haven't even mentioned cost, but I mean, for example, I believe Toronto at one point said renaming of Dundas Street, and Mississauga, I recall, indicated to me that Dundas is an extension of the Toronto Street. And of course, we have our own very extensive Dundas Street. And I recall that the mayor of Mississauga cited the price tags associated with that. But I think the other thing is to understand the historical piece to that. So I don't mean to babble on this, because I think this is an important project that we're undertaking. And I think to bring specificity and better clarity to it is important. But I wonder if staff, Chair, might have any comments on kind of next steps.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mr. Feldberg, if you can just lay out the process of next steps of how the community consultation will go with those impacted by some of these points that the mayor raised, and that we would be addressing any associated costs late in 2023.
Certainly, Madam Chair, and through you to your worship. At this point, I guess what we're looking at is we want to be consistent with other municipalities in Ontario. So we're looking for best practices as well. And that's not just on the historical context, but everything we're doing around the renaming. So as you suggested, we are certainly very early days. We still have a lot of work to do to consult with the public and determine where they sit on this. The goal will be to engage with stakeholders that have expertise in this type of work. So, an example might be Latch, we would engage with, as they would certainly have some input on historical context. As for the cost, it's absolutely a consideration. And what we've built into the terms of reference is a period or a component where we would bring business cases forward to the multi-year budget in 2023-2024, so that could be considered by council and funds could be allocated as appropriate.
That's helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And as budget chair, definitely looking forward to the multi-year budget process next time, as we have more information and can make informed decisions going forward with public consultation. I have no one else on my speakers list. If someone would like to jump in before we call the vote on all consent items 2.1 through to 2.6. We do have some visiting counselors with us as well. They're always welcome to ask questions at this point. Okay, seeing none, it's already been duly moved and seconded. Calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
We have no scheduled items today. Under items for direction, we have 4.1, 4.2. They both deal with sidewalks. Ms. Dan is with us to provide opening remarks, as this is some new information before us, so she'll need about 2 minutes. And then after that, you can decide if you would like to call the items separate or how committee would like to proceed. So Ms. Dan, please proceed with your remarks.
Thank you. Through the chair. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce the reports today. So we have the new Sidewalks in Established Neighborhood report and its companion report, which provides the 2022 new sidewalk project list. The report today provides recommendations for how we implement new sidewalk connections in established neighborhoods where pedestrian connections do not currently exist. 2021 was the first year in which London Plan policy came into effect, requiring sidewalks to be included on both sides of most streets. This meant road reconstruction and underground infrastructure renewal projects were now introducing more impactful changes to the neighborhoods in which they were planned. The requirement of new sidewalks for these projects sparked considerable debate this past spring, influencing many of the 2021 project designs. It also raised the question of how to proceed with future projects in a manner that considers public feedback while meeting the goals of the London Plan. Planning for sidewalks on both sides of most streets has become standard practice amongst many Ontario municipalities. Walking is an active mode of transportation that has long been promoted in London and reinforced in the Smart Moves 2030 Transportation Master Plan. This report outlines the many policies approved by Council over the last decade that support improved connectivity and safety in the city and its neighborhoods. And while the city is committed to maintaining strong and healthy communities through safe and accessible infrastructure, we already heard from some neighborhoods last year that the approach to implementing sidewalks needs improvement, including more collaboration and engagement with the residents of the communities where projects are planned that would add new sidewalks. Today's report provides recommendations for engaging neighborhoods with gaps in pedestrian connectivity at both the community level and at the street level in a manner that's consistent with city mobility policies. A central component of the recommended engagement approach is the concept of creating neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plans, or NSCPs, which are intended to guide communities in thinking holistically about connectivity in their neighborhood. If approved, NSCPs would be implemented on a trial basis in 2022 and then would inform future road reconstruction, infrastructure renewal, and new sidewalk program planning and design starting in 2023. Sidewalks are a critical piece of infrastructure that increase safety, encourage active travel, improve accessibility, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and benefit all ages and abilities. It is our hope that NSCPs can not only provide a more strategic and holistic framework for adding new sidewalk connections within neighborhoods, but also give residents opportunities to learn more about pedestrian experiences and generate important conversations about improving access to essential places and services. So thank you again, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you for that overview and for staff's work on these two reports to bring them forward, recognizing the challenging conversations we had at committee and council this year. Looking to committee to see if you'd like 4.1 and 4.2 called separate. Councillor Cassidy, you would like them called separate? Is she frozen?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, you had froze up there, so perfect. We were going to deal with those separate. So looking for a mover and a seconder for item 4.1 being the new sidewalk in established neighborhoods. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Going to committee or for questions and comments. I will start my speakers list with Councillor Helmer, followed by the mayor, and visiting councillors are welcome to request to speak as well. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. Appreciate the approaches being recommended by staff. I think the earlier we're engaging the communities about filling in the gaps in the sidewalk network, the better. And I do think that this kind of approach could lead to more sidewalk segments being filled in over time. So I support it as a different way of trying to do things. I guess one of the concerns that I have is that if we engage people and we don't have a good understanding of what the design impacts will be about things like trees and so on, that a lot of the concerns come up when the design details are known and the tree impacts are known. And so I wonder, just through the chair, if staff would like to speak to the extent to which we're going to be able to answer those questions when we're at the starting point of the neighborhood sidewalk connectivity planning process.
Thank you. Ms. Dan.
Thank you, and through the chair. We've promoted or recommended sort of a two-stage approach to engaging the community. So at the community level through the neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan, we would be pretty early stages. So we won't be into the weeds in terms of, how many trees are going to be impacted on individual streets, but we can have the discussion about the bigger picture and connectivity. And we can talk about educating the public on some of the tools that we have when we're designing the streets to be able to mitigate some of those impacts, and to help them understand the approach that we take. But then we still need to engage the public at a street level when it's time to do individual street projects. And that's when we can have that discussion about what are our options. Can we look at trying to reduce the road width, putting the sidewalk behind the back of curb rather than having a boulevard? I'm looking at the tree inventory to see, what is the best way that we can implement a sidewalk, but do it in a way that mitigates the impacts to the neighborhood. And so again, it's sort of a two-stage conversation that we want to have with folks that are potentially impacted by these projects.
Councillor Helmer, follow up.
Thank you. So that's helpful. I wonder once work has been done in one of these areas to develop a neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan, if there can also be a planting strategy that's associated with that. You know, one of the things that I think is frustrating for everyone is if we know that we're going to be coming through based on the life cycle work that needs to be done on a road, and we expect that the reconstruction of a road is going to impact mature trees in the neighborhood, coming through several years before the construction project and planting in perhaps in behind or a little bit further back from where the construction will be, allow the trees time to take root and establish themselves and start growing, could mitigate some of the loss of the mature tree canopy that happens. And I wonder if there's opportunities to do that on the urban forestry side. Once we know that we've identified these areas are going to have a sidewalk, we're expecting that there's going to be some impacts to trees from the road reconstruction, whether that's going to help inform sort of proactive succession planting in neighborhoods like that.
Thank you. Ms. Dan?
Through the chair, I think subject to council approval to move forward with this approach, we'll be developing what that neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan engagement looks like. And we're anticipating it would be multidisciplined. So we're not just going in to talk about sidewalks. I think when we need to talk to a community, we want to look at all the different aspects. Where are the schools, where's transit, where's services? And I think including a discussion at the high level about trees in the neighborhood and what we can do to be proactive about that is a really good addition to that.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer.
Just a brief comment from me. I remember Councillor Hopkins navigating through the Byron work, which is mentioned in this report as a good example, and I think it is a good example of how things can be done well. I remember Councillor Hubert, he was deputy mayor at the time, doing something similar in Oak Ridge with a number of projects that needed to happen there, trying to plan them on a slightly larger community scale and securing buy-in from the residents. So I do think there's some hope for doing things more effectively with this kind of area-based approach. So I'm got my fingers crossed we'll actually get some more sidewalks built and fill in more of those gaps in the safe, accessible, active transportation network.
Thank you, Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to commend staff for the approach that you're taking in terms of a really consultative approach with neighborhoods. I mean, we're not talking about new subdivisions. I think that's pretty straightforward and pretty clear. We're talking about established neighborhoods, and we all know that that was fairly contentious. And councillors on all sides of the issue sometimes took one perspective in their own ward and different perspectives in other wards for whatever good reason they did. But I think to have something that's more broadly, I'll say consistent in terms of the outreach. And I agree with Councillor Helmer about the approach with regard to trees. I think that certainly was one of the significant concerns we heard as it related to mature trees being taken out on certain sidewalks or certain sides of the road where sidewalks were being considered. So I think what we're trying to do here is something that's less contentious. But by the way, I still think it will be as soon as there will be established neighborhoods that have had an expectation. You will hear some neighborhoods express very strongly their views. But I think this consultative approach and the proactivity, and so Ms. Dan, to you and your team, I salute that, and I look forward to this going forward to council for thoughtful response, and my hope is they'll support it.
Thank you, and welcoming guest Councillor Van Holst to committee. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say there's a really nice theme that's been well established at your committee today, and that, you know, this is a city where we don't say, well, this is the way we've always done it. So in a number of occasions here, we're looking at new ways to approach things, recognizing that there's challenges with engaging with the public in a way that's really effective. And although I think we've had many very effective ways of engaging, I see an evolution here that's very much on the pulse of what needs to be changed. So that's great. Thank you to staff for looking into those things.
Thank you for those comments. Looking to anyone else of committee or guests who would like to make a comment, as my speakers list is currently exhausted. Seeing none, it's been duly moved and seconded, and calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
That brings us on to item 4.2 under items for direction. It's the new sidewalk projects list for 2022. And the recommendation is that the report be received for information. This one is going to be discussed separately by request of Councillor Cassidy. So Councillor, would it be okay if I started with you for your comments? Okay, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a motion here because the sidewalk that we discussed in my ward last year had been deferred while staff did a photometric study on Imperial Road to look into the possibility of moving street lights to the other side of the street. But I'm really pleased to see the neighborhood connectivity plan report come forward, and I think that that suits this neighborhood very well. So I would like to propose a motion that the installation of the sidewalk on Imperial Road be. Sorry,
with some sort of feedback. I'm not sure what that's about, but please keep trying.
Okay, thanks. So my motion would be along the lines that the installation of the sidewalk on Imperial Road be referred back to Civic Administration for consideration of including Imperial Road as part of a neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan. So I just want to explain my rationale for doing a connectivity plan in this neighborhood. The way that the staff report, the previous staff report shows the districts broken up in the city. It shows this as part of the Stony Brook area, which is a really big area. And this particular sidewalk is in a smaller neighborhood called the Grenfell Neighborhood. It's one of those neighborhoods that has that sort of mix of streets with sidewalks and streets without. And Imperial Road is one of the fewer streets in the neighborhood that doesn't currently have a sidewalk on it. The Grenfell neighborhood and then the bigger Stony Brook or Stony Creek planning district are also a combination of new and old. So there's a really new half that has all the sidewalks on both sides of the streets. The smaller crescents and cul-de-sacs have the single sidewalks. There's a very large school, one of the largest ones in the city in this district. It's the Stony Creek Public School. There is a large district park in this planning district, the Constitution Park, and then there are a number of smaller parks. So the whole area would benefit greatly from a sidewalk, a neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan. There's a lot of movement within the neighborhood to the schools, to the park. Also, Mother Teresa Secondary School is in this planning district as well. There are a number of serious safety concerns right now at Stony Creek Public School. And so I think as well, I'm pushing to I'm helping the parents there to get a school travel planning committee going at that school to address some of those safety concerns. We have installed no parking zones in areas around that school. So it is, I say all this to point out that there are broader issues in the entire neighborhood and in the entire district. And Imperial Road is just one small part of it. So I think the entire planning district could definitely benefit from having this neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan in that area. So rather than dealing with these streets on the one-off basis, I think it would do us well to do one of these plans in this area. So that's my motion, and I'm looking for a seconder.
Thank you for that. The wording has been added into eScribe for committee could see it. And it's just that the installation of the sidewalk on Imperial Road be referred back to Civic Administration for consideration of including Imperial Road as part of the neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan. I am happy to second that. Counselor Hummer, did you want to second that or speak to it?
Speak to it.
Okay, thank you. I will second it for it can be on the floor and then we can proceed with questions and comments. Okay, it's been seconded and I will start with Counselor Helmer.
Thank you. Just so I can understand what the implications of the motion would be, perhaps through the chair, staff could weigh in on what does that mean in terms of the timeline for the reconstruction project, or do we think we'd have a neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan in place relatively soon, or is this a long process that's going to take a while and then the reconstruction project would be waiting 1 or more years? So that's the first one, the sort of what's the timeline impact? And the second is what's the status of the reconstruction project? How urgent is it? Can it actually wait for the time that we think it might take?
Perfect. Thank you for those. Ms. Scher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Ms. Dan is prepared to answer that question.
Perfect. Thank you. Ms. Dan?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll start with the first part. In terms of our approach for neighborhood connection plans, we were thinking that we would probably be doing maybe 2 or 3 each year to inform the following year's construction season. For the upcoming year in 2022, we hadn't specifically decided which ones we would start with. We are looking at the Edge Hill area because there's 2 projects there. We've recommended deferring so that we could do a trial NSCP in that location. But we could consider this area as one of the ones we do look at for next year, which then would push construction of Imperial to 2023 at the earliest. One of the things that we'll be doing as well when we go through and develop how we approach these plans is figuring out, and it's going to be case by case, how big of an area we would be looking at each one. So does it make sense to just do a small pocket for the Grenfell area? Would be looking at the larger Stony Creek and Stony Brook areas. So those are things that we'd have to kind of review on a case by case basis and see what makes the most sense. But in general, we're thinking if we can do 2 or 3 of these plans each year to inform the following year's construction season, then after a few years, we've got pretty much most of those key areas that have gaps covered, and any future infrastructure projects can just follow the plan as opposed to having to continue having this discussion every year. So that's sort of where we're headed at. I will pass the question over to Ugo De Candido, who can speak to just the status of Imperial and whether there's any other infrastructure requirements that are going to drive the need for that project.
Thank you. Through the chair. The pavement quality index for both locations, Imperial and Balcarres, is in the 1 to 5 year range. So certainly we can afford some time to do a thorough review and defer the project a year or 2 to ensure that we meet the terms of the plan if that is in place.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer, a follow-up?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, I guess the earliest that the reconstruction project could go ahead is 2023. Am I understanding that correctly? If the neighborhood sidewalk connectivity plan started as sort of the first batch, then you could potentially be in the ground fixing the road and think what other changes are needed in 2023?
Ms. Dan?
Yes, that's correct. Through the chair, we would be reviewing the NSCP if we did it in our first batch during 2022, and then that would inform reconstruction projects in the area for 2023.
Councillor Helmer?
Okay, so I think I can support that motion then. It's not ideal, I don't think, to delay the project. It's now going to be 2 years push back. I did want to say I appreciate the staff analysis. I know I was the one who suggested moving the sidewalk to the other side, and seeing the feedback from staff about what the impacts will be for either locations. You know, I'm persuaded that if a sidewalk goes in on that street, that what you're recommending is actually the best idea. So, you know, I think if it's going to be 1 year as part of the neighborhood connectivity planning, I can support that. I'm concerned about some of these delays, especially when it means that overall projects can cost more. You know, inflation for a couple of years does add up. And I want us to keep that in mind, of course. But you know, if it's going to be 2023 instead of 2022, I can support that.
Thank you. And just for the public or anyone joining us from home, when staff refer to the PQI, it's the Pavement Quality Index that help dictate how critical a road is in its condition in order to meet replacement criteria. I have no other questions and hands up from committee or visiting counselors, so just looking for that now. Okay, seeing none, it's been duly moved and seconded, calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. That leaves us with the original staff report in front of us, that the report be received for information for the new sidewalk project list in 2022. I would need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Mayor Holder. Looking to committee and visiting councillors for questions and comments, and I will begin with Councillor Helmer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there's a number of sidewalks that are proposed to be built as part of either reconstruction projects or the new sidewalk program in Ward 4. And I can tell you that even just as recently as this summer, I had residents contacting me asking for these sidewalks to be constructed and how can we get them built faster and sooner so that people can get from where they live to the places they want to go safely. And one fellow who called was a grandfather, and he said, I can get around myself. I often drive out of my driveway, and that's how I'm getting around. But I got grandkids coming over all the time now, and they're riding their bikes, and they're coming out on the road, and people are using this street as a cut through, and the people are driving pretty fast. And I just need sidewalks right now for my grandkids so that they're safe and they can learn how to ride a bike in a safe way. And I just wanted to point that out because sometimes we hear no about sidewalks, and we don't hear the requests from people who are saying, I really desperately want sidewalks in our neighborhood, and the sooner you can build them, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So I know some of these sidewalks, people are a bit more divided in Ward 4. There's a couple where they've lived in that area for a long time without sidewalks, and they don't really get why we need to have more. But I'm supporting those sidewalks in that neighborhood that need to be added in. It's going to be a big improvement in that neighborhood long term, and it's going to provide people with those connectivity points out to area that's really well serviced by transit. And one of the main ways that people get around is by walking out to the bus stop and jumping on the bus. So I appreciate the work that staff have done to make it really clear what's happening and through which programs. I think it's actually really helpful to be able to track it this way. And I support the ones certainly that are in Ward 4, and people are going to be very happy to see a lot of them going ahead.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Van Holst, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also pleased to see some of the new sidewalks going in the areas where I've had citizens raise requests. The request that often comes is related to children walking to school. And I wonder how significant a factor that is, or are we engaged very much with the school board in terms of choosing the locations for new sidewalks?
Thank you for that. And to staff, is there coordination with our list for the safe routes to schools and other communities, or how is that considered as per the councillor's question?
Absolutely. Through the chair, as part of our connection plans, we would intend to engage with school administrations and coordinate with the Active and Safe Routes to School program. That really often is a key location in all of the neighborhoods in terms of walking, pedestrian traffic, not only just for school people, but people who use the yard after school hours to enjoy outside time. So it's definitely a key point. We would be engaging with school administrations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looking to committee and guests for any other questions or comments? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded, calling the question.
Chair Pelosa.
Sorry, Councillor Helmer, yes.
I've been kicked out of eScribe, so I'll vote in favor.
Thank you. Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Under the deferred matters list, 5.1, there will be one update then on it, as number 9 for the Imperial Road Sidewalk discussion has made progress today. So looking for a mover and a seconder of the deferred matters list. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Looking for questions or comments in regards to the deferred matters list. Seeing none, I will call the question. Councillor Helmer, your vote?
I'm in favor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Do you see if there's any additional business today? And item 5.2, we had an added report of the Cycling Advisory Committee. Okay, when that, they were just having recommendations for staff and add some other feedback. So looking for a mover and a seconder for the Cycling Advisory Committee 10th report. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by the Mayor. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, calling the question.
I'm in favor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Looking to committees, see if there's any additional business. Seeing none, that would conclude our agenda today, and I would need a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Helmer. A hand vote is adequate. All in favor of adjournment?
The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today, and to staff for their hard work, and the public for joining us. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Chair.